wondering, we are tweeting now from TEDxIIT. If you're on Twitter, you can follow the hashtag TEDxIIT for a live update. Our next speaker, Nityananda Prandasa, is a practicing yogi and Vedic scholar. For the past 10 years, he has influenced the lives of many, especially the youth in the Chicagoland area. He is regularly invited by educational institutions like IIT, Northwestern University, UIC, and Purdue University to speak on topics based on the Vedic worldview. Prior to taking up a Vedic lifestyle, he spent over 16 years in the field of marketing working for Nielsen, which is one of the top marketing research firms in the world. He is currently involved with multiple nonprofit organizations, including the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Today, Nityananda will talk about unity and diversity. Welcome to the stage, Nityananda Prandasa.
So good afternoon. I am particularly honored and happy to have this opportunity to be at a TEDxIIT event and among such wonderful speakers who I think as a common theme is the idea of sharing, giving, and as the tagline for TED was ideas worth sharing. I'd like all of us to do a short exercise because that goes with what I'm going to present today, unity in diversity. Take a moment and look to your left, to the person sitting next to you. Okay? Those who are sitting in the aisle, you only get to do 50% of the exercise. Observe, note how different this person next to you might be. Hair color, don't stare into their eyes because they're looking to their left. Now look to your right, and again those on the aisle. So, how different each person is. And with that, we also now notice that there might be something that's very common amongst us. Okay? So that's sort of the essential theme that I'm going to be touching on. In the number of years that I've stood in front of an audience and presented, I've done this about 15 years, and when I first started presenting, a friend who was coaching me in standing up in front of an audience said to me, just don't worry. When you have to present to an audience, just imagine them sitting naked. I want you to know that's not what I am doing. So the idea of unity in diversity comes from the Vedic paradigm, or the Vedic body of knowledge. The word Veda means body of knowledge. And given the 15 or 18 minutes that I have, I can hardly do justice by speaking about what the Vedas encompass. So what we might hear today would be probably a wafer-thin slice of one of the ideas within the Vedas. Now the Vedas deal with every aspect of knowledge because they encompass knowledge as a totality. So there is knowledge about physics, there is knowledge about chemistry, biology, there is knowledge about architecture, astronomy, warfare, metaphysics, spirituality, etc. And the idea is that each of these body or units of knowledge are not meant to be understood individually, but as a totality in how to live life for a higher quality of experience as we go through life. And now the United States becoming a melting pot of so many cultures, we're noticing so many of us here in this room come from such diverse backgrounds. Yet we know that there is something in common. So I'm going to propose, or I'm going to share with you, a spiritual solution of how to find unity amongst that diversity that we have. Whether people from Asia, people who have been born and raised in America, or immigrants from other places. I myself come to the US about 16 years ago. And yet, one of the things that has profoundly touched me is the idea of finding unity in diversity. This is a very important Vedic aphorism, if you will, that says that among everything that we see, that there's so much variety that's expressed in nature. And we can see that in this variety, we've tried to find commonality. We gather or we group across different ideas or ideologies. It could be nationality, right? It could be our patriotism. We could group around a sports team. We could group around ethnic aspects or ethnicity. We could group around different religious ideas or ideologies. And what we find that is, although we are grouping, we still remain individuals. And our individuality is never lost. Yet, when we come together as different, or on the basis of different ideologies, we try to find a fine balance between what's common as an ideology and our individuality. This is called the simultaneous oneness and difference, or something that we find common. We find a sense of oneness within the ideology, but we maintain our individuality. Now, whether it is patriotism, whether it is religion, whether it is grouping around a sports team, the whole Vedic perspective is that as we go through life, we learn to distinguish between what is called eternal and what is called temporary. And the whole idea of the Vedic education is to be able to discern that difference. For example, we're all sitting here, and the Vedas 101 would be that although we are sitting here, we're actually very distinct from this body. Because this body, if you notice carefully, although has so many chemical processes happening, this body is made of matter. And who we are as a living entity is not material. And so there is this very unique combination of a spiritual entity encased within a material body. And it is because of the presence of the spiritual entity that this body becomes activated, and the absence of which we call death. So this body is temporary. It goes through transformations, it goes through changes, while the spiritual being or the entity that who we really are does not. So there is this eternal principle that the soul resides within this ever-changing material body. And interestingly enough, this material body is of a lot of variety. There is the human beings, and that too, enough diversity within the human race. We have animals, plants or trees, birds, insects, and the little micro germs that we don't even see. So what is happening is that we are all spiritual entities just inhabiting different bodies and interacting with each other. So while we obviously see the variety, right, we see the distinctions, someone sitting next to me may be Caucasian or African American or from some part of Asia, so maybe a man or a woman, maybe of this religious inclination or that ethnicity, or may have that ideology. The person sitting next to me, like Joseph Clare was talking about community, someone may not agree with that. Someone may agree, or someone may have a different idea. There's so much variety, but the bottom line is that we're all spiritual entities, and that's commonality amongst us. And so the whole Vedic perspective is to bring us to seeing from that vantage point. When we see from that vantage point, there is a sense of respect. There is a sense of empathy. And of course, the whole idea of compassion, the whole idea of giving and sharing comes from that sense of commonality, that we are all living entities. We're all spiritual beings. We may have different situations called the material bodies. It's all different across the board. And so this whole Vedic paradigm is based on this what's called the eternal unchanging self. And as we notice that we go through life, we're first born, then our body grows into childhood and adulthood, and then what's called old age, and then death. So the whole Vedic idea is that the soul goes through a whole series of different bodies and life forms from one lifetime to another. And what makes us go from one form of body into another form of body is on the basis of what's called the karma theory, or the karma principle. We generally believe in good karma, bad karma. Someone gave me money, that was good karma. I gave my money to someone, that was bad karma, etc. Or, I found a job, that was good karma. Someone lost their job, that was bad karma. Karma actually has two connotations. One is what I do, that act, that action is called a karma. And what impels me to act in a particular manner is karma. And when I act, there is a reaction to it. So, and that reaction is also karma. So, if you pardon me, I'll tell you a joke. A person showed up at the gates of heaven, apparently. And so the gatekeepers opened and said, yes, how may we help you? So I'd like to get in. And they looked at their records and said, sorry, we're not expecting you here. How did you get here? Oh, well, I just showed up. I'd like to get in. So they said, well, we'll find out if we can let you in. And so the person who manages heaven came up to this person and said, oh, well, to get into heaven, minimally you'll have to have done something good. Have you done anything good in your life? So this person thought about it and said, oh yeah, of course I've done something good. Yeah, please tell us, what have you done? He said, I was walking along and I saw a bunch of bikers. They were harassing a nice young lady, and I couldn't stand it. So I went up to the biker and I challenged him. I asked him to stop. I said, yeah, go on. And he stood up. He was about 7 feet tall, and he was big, 350-pound guy. And I said, yes, and what did you do? He said, this should stop, or else. And I plucked out the nose ring that he was, the nose piercing. And so the person said, oh, really? And when did that happen? He said, about 30 seconds ago. So the karma principle is that for every action, there is some reaction. And so the Vedic paradigm doesn't limit us to just the human form of life, but it reminds us, or at least teaches us, that how we act today has a significant impact on how our next moment or next day, in fact, even the next life will look like. So it's the whole idea of living responsibly, not just social responsibility, but just living responsibly. And the soul, the living entity who we are, gets the opportunity to transmigrate from one form into another perpetually. And that's why we see this variety, this 8,400,000 species of life according to the Vedic paradigm. That's what we have around us. And each one of us, according to the Vedic paradigm, has occupied one of those life forms at some point in time. And we will as we go down time in the future. So there's this story of what the Vedas want us to come to consider is how much attention are we paying to the spirit soul, or the living entity within us, who we really are. And so we spend all of our time, like we saw the pie chart, we spend 8 hours sleeping, 4 hours watching TV. That was a conservative estimate. And then we do so much community service, we do so many hours of work, etc. But if you notice, all of that is for maintaining the body. The cosmetics that we buy, the food that we eat, is nothing but to nourish the body. The Vedas want us to consider what are we doing to nourish the soul. And that is where, as when we were hearing the introduction of Amina, that she wants us, or she wants for herself and others, to somehow connect to the divine. And so for each of us, that opportunity must be available, or we should make that opportunity available for ourselves. And the Vedas want us to go in that direction. So how do we fit in? This variety that we have, how do we fit into this whole grand scheme of variety while we find that sense of unity amongst ourselves? And for that, we have to have what's called a spiritual vision. The spiritual vision is, although we see variety, we're all individual living entities. We have that sense of commonality. And so to respect each other, to serve each other, to help each other, to honor each other on that platform as individual living beings. And so then this sense of unity comes not just from, oh, I have an ideology that we all root for this team and we don't root for that team, but as individual living beings. And that is beyond just looking at each other as human beings. So this whole idea of respect, empathy, compassion comes when we have this spiritual vision, or at the beginning of acting as the spiritual personalities that we are. So like I said, all I have time is for a wafer-thin slice of understanding that we as living entities are occupying a material body. And all that we generally do, the Vedas can say, what we do is mostly to cater to the body, which is temporary. And one should also try to find time to cater to the spiritual aspect of ourselves, because that's what nourishes this body. Because in the absence of this body, in the absence of this soul, there isn't a body to inhabit, because it's usually either buried or cremated, because at the end of life, that's what happens to the body. So the human life is meant to be a platform for uplifting our consciousness. So that's what I wanted to share with you from a Vedic paradigm, so that we have at least a beginning of a different consideration altogether. So thank you very much for your time. It was very nice to be with all of you.